Hello.
Yo.
Welcome to the next episode of the Brio in the Box podcast. It is like middle of May-ish.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's flying by.
It's nice out now, finally.
Mm-hmm.
I packed away the coat rack and I turned off the furnace at the gym this morning. No more furnace.
Yeah.
I don't care how cold it is in the morning. We're done with it.
It's a weird transition because we get to the point where there's no furnace. And it gets cold again in the fall. We turn it on and then we all have to smell burning dust for the next day or two.
Okay, so May is several things. One of them is Mental Health Awareness Month. May is Mental Health Month.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, we did a whole series on mental health, a closely held topic to both of our hearts for several reasons. Last week on the weekly blog I reposted, we did a 3-part series on the podcast last year about mental health.
Yeah.
Our own personal journeys. The middle episode that I reposted was like, I think 33 different things you can do to improve your mental health. And then the last one was on the very new frontier of the use of psychedelics in mental health as well. So go back and watch all 3 of them, really, if you want to, but particularly the second one, which bridges us into, since a year ago, what are some other new things that we've added to the list of things you can do to improve your mental health?
Yeah. So I've been playing with something new.
Yeah.
And you've done this before.
Yeah.
And I thought you were crazy when you did it. But now I've kind of talked about this a little bit in a few classes. And I've started taping my mouth when sleeping.
And the first time you say that, people will look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah.
Like, what bonkers shit is this now?
Yeah.
So literally taping your mouth closed at night while you sleep.
Yeah.
Why on earth would you do that?
There's actually a ton of benefit. So it has really been gaining a lot of popularity to the point where there's now a company that sells mouth-specific strips of tape, and it's called hostage tape, which is hilarious. And I didn't actually go ahead and buy that. First of all, I bought just this kind of medical tape, and it's just a roll of tape. It was like $8 or whatever. And I just take enough to cover my mouth, and you just put it on and you're good to go. Mm-hmm. So you're not like multiple. No,
it's not like duct tape or anything.
No, you don't. I probably wouldn't recommend duct tape. Medical tape comes off nice and smooth in the morning, so that's what you want. But that hostage tape, their selling feature is that even if you have facial hair, it's supposed to still come off nicely because you don't want to wear tape all the time, just kind of when you're sleeping.
I first heard of that on the Jocko podcast, and I thought they were kidding when they were talking about taping your mouth shut at night, and they're like, oh yeah, wearing your hostage tape. And I was like, oh, haha, that's funny. And then, oh no, that's an actual brand name of the stuff. Yeah. So obviously no affiliation with them, but I think that's hilarious marketing.
It is a hilarious name. I love it. So yeah, I put it on when I go to sleep. And like for the first probably 2, maybe 3 nights, it felt weird for sure. It took some getting used to. There was a night or two where I ended up taking it off about halfway through because it was bothering me. But the strange thing is that now I find it soothing. It's weird. I enjoy the feeling of it, and I don't know why that is. So people that sleep with their mouth open, their mouth tends to dry out a lot. And I'm sure a lot of us have woken up in the middle of the night with your mouth agape and you need a drink of water and you just feel gross in your mouth. But that actually can contribute to cavities, which is interesting. And I've always had, not recently since I've been seeing Dr. Ryan, but I, for a long time, have had cavity problems in the past. And I don't know if it was because I was a bit of a mouth breather or not, but it can contribute to cavities. Bad breath as well. If you wake up with really bad breath, you might be a mouth breather. And then just dry lips in general, it can be a big thing. And then on the opposite side of that, if you're a drooler, you tend to drool with your mouth open. And that can be really bad for your skin. Just getting your saliva all over your pillow and then continuing to sleep on it, it can make you break out and stuff. So there's a couple of, aesthetic type things like that. Another big one is it can improve your snoring. So
big time.
Not necessarily major sleep apnea people, but there's been studies that have shown that it reduces snoring. And for people with minor sleep apnea, can actually improve their sleep. And then there's this whole world of people that are trying to improve their posture. And it stems from tongue posture, which I don't know if we've talked about this or not, but the way your tongue is supposed to rest in your mouth is it's supposed to rest on the top. You're supposed to have your tongue on the roof of your mouth. And that is where it rests. But a lot of people, they have their mouth slightly open and their tongue just hanging out in the bottom. Yeah. And now that I've pointed it out, you'll probably notice it in public when you see it. But people with that sort of tongue posture, they tend to be posturally slumped over and that chronically open mouth, lazy breathing sort of thing. So there's this whole thing about training yourself to push your tongue up onto the roof of your mouth to train it to rest there. And I do that. I've always naturally had my tongue rest on the roof of my mouth. It's only when I sleep that I notice that my mouth is open.
I often, when people go, how would I know if I'm a mouth breather when I sleep? I always go, do you wake up with drool on your pillow? And they're like, oh yeah, all the time. I'm like, then you're sleeping with your mouth open.
Yeah.
If you have your mouth closed, you don't drool while you sleep. The resting tongue posture thing, I've talked about when I teach deadlifts, actually, that if you want to increase intra-abdominal pressure, it's called the Valsalva maneuver, but it's basically just like a tongue posture thing. You take like the back of your tongue and you seal it to the roof of your mouth. And if you push up really hard against the upper palate and feel your abs, it helps you brace.
Yeah.
But then even if you do that lightly, at 3 out of 10, try to do that and slouch. You like can't, because if you try to slouch forward, it cuts off your airway. Whereas if you have your tongue against the roof of your mouth and you want to breathe through your nose, it makes you sit up better. So a lot of slouchy posture either comes from or results in that like slack-jawed mouth breather thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's super interesting stuff. But there's some like major things as well that I'm hoping to benefit from. The first one is mental health based. We've all heard of breath work to help you relax, right? Where you like sit on a pillow and you like focus on your breathing and you try to just like slow everything down and you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth and that kind of thing.
Yoga breathing, meditative breathing. Yeah.
So basically that type of steady rhythmic breathing, it activates your parasympathetic nervous system. And it has been shown to seriously decrease your stress and your anxiety levels, which is why it's such a great tool for people that struggle with those issues. But if you can train yourself to breathe through your nose at a smooth, steady pace through the night, you're basically doing it subconsciously. You don't even have to think about it. Your brain gets that same sort of benefit from it. And it's been shown to train yourself to nose breathe, it will decrease your stress and your overall levels of anxiety, which is super interesting.
Yeah, so your two, like autonomic nervous system, parasympathetic and sympathetic, rest and digest. One is fight or flight. So if you're in fight or flight, and that's associated with being anxious, anxiety type things, getting better at activating the parasympathetic nervous system. And it doesn't have to be like alms in a cross-legged position on a yoga pillow, you can just train yourself to have better breathing patterns, better tongue posture. And you can even do it while you're sleeping.
Yeah. So very interesting mental health benefits, but then the physical benefits you can have are very interesting as well. So even just by breathing through your nose, you've got a smaller sort of tube to breathe through. So it requires more pressure, more strength, and it does actually strengthen your lungs in doing so. But it also greatly improves your oxygen transport and improves your nitric oxide levels. So nitric oxide is basically a vasodilator. And I don't know, is it the same stuff that they put in pre-workouts and stuff where like they sell it as a supplement you can take?
Yeah, there was the old NO explode.
Yeah.
So yeah, the greatest reserve of nitric oxide is in your sinuses. So when you breathe through your nose, or like in yoga breathing, they hum, like vibrating your sinuses.
Right.
Releases nitric oxide. But yeah, so when you're like a bodybuilder and you give a dose of nitric oxide or a nitric oxide activator, it gives you the pump.
Right.
Because it opens up your blood
Makes
vessels.
your blood vessels stick out.
Get swole, get the veins.
Get the veins.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can just improve your levels of nitric oxide just by breathing properly. So by doing so, your blood vessels dilate, it improves your blood flow, it decreases your blood pressure, really good for your heart, really good for your lungs. So there's a ton of like downstream benefits just from breathing properly through your nose.
Yeah, it's super important. There's a whole niche of cardiovascular researchers that are on the hypothesis that poor nitric oxide production might be the actual root cause of cardiovascular disease. Nitric oxide, like you said, vasodilator, it keeps the smooth muscles pliable. Like your blood vessels are supposed to be responsive to, handle more or less or higher heart rates or things. When there's not enough nitric oxide, then the smooth muscles start to stiffen and they can't be as responsive. That starts to cause damage to the endothelium, the little delicate lining. And then boom, now we start to have repair mechanisms to repair the damage. Now we have clotting factors. Boom, now we have atherosclerotic plaques building up.
Right.
So poor nitric oxide production may actually be, and this is certainly a hypothesis, not a for certain, but there's a very solid mechanistic explanation of why that may actually be at the root cause.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting stuff. And it's definitely one of those things where you can easily not easily. It's hard to do. It's hard to get used to doing it, but you can make some subtle improvements by making some subtle changes. It's not that crazy.
Yeah. I taped my mouth shut for about 18 months. I did it in pre-COVID, 2018. Yeah, similar, like you read about these things and better benefits. I think I've had braces twice in my life. So like an underdeveloped dental arch, too narrow, and my teeth come in crooked. That's one of the first signs that you don't have a proper upper airway breathing palate. Probably vitamin K2 deficient when I was growing up in the early 80s in the low fat margarine era. So, K2 deficiency causes early calcification of the middle third of the face. And so then your face is too narrow. Your breathing patterns aren't good. And then guess what? I had asthma since I was like 8. So one of the most unexpected benefits to me when I retrained my breathing patterns, mostly learning to nasal breathe at night, but just in general all day, every time I think of it, I'm like, close your mouth. If I catch myself walking around the house or cooking or driving with my mouth open, just every time I think of it, close your mouth, breathe through your nose, is I basically don't have asthma anymore.
Yeah.
Which is wild to me. There was a point in time where I was like a daily inhaler multiple times a day kind of person. And now it's once in a while, if I'm around like furry animals and too close to them, like still kind of have mild allergies, get a little wheezy, but it is nothing like on the level that it used to be.
Yeah. It's super interesting. Yeah, I don't know why it took me so long to wrap my head around doing it. I guess that's the way it goes. You'll usually do something and then like a year or two later, I'll be like, okay, I'll give it a try. I used to be a really terrible sleeper. I would wake up for any noise and it took me forever to fall asleep and I had a really hard time staying asleep. And in the last few years, I've really done some hard things to make it easier in the long run. So we bought the bed coolie thing, which, the benefit is it's a cooler place to sleep and you sleep better in a cool climate. But when we first plugged this thing in, the fan was loud. I was like, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to fall asleep.
I remember the first night you were like, fuck this thing. There's no way I'm going to be able to sleep.
And the first night, it was hard. And I was super tired the next day. And I was like, I don't know about this, but I like gave it a shot and I gave it a shot. And that was the catalyst to now I like cannot sleep without a noise machine. It's crazy. And I sleep so much deeper now. I remember we would go and visit Ryan and stay in his like awesome little cabins on the water. And I couldn't sleep at night because his fridge would be running and it would keep me up. And now, really? Yeah. And I remember not complaining, but him being like, do you want to like sleep somewhere else? I'm like, no. I'm like, don't, it's fine. I'm like, I'm just a terrible sleeper. But now I put my little phone thing on, the little baby noise monitor thing, and I sleep through anything like traffic or whatever. I sleep through it. It's great. Same thing with the breathing. I've noticed that I would wake up and I would be like drooling on my pillow and my mouth would be open and it would be dry in the morning. And I was never really a snorer or anything, but I would definitely have the dry mouth stuff. And at first, when I put the tape on, I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to fall asleep like that. But I did it evening after I had done the super early morning shift. And so I was way more tired. And then the first night was like, not great, but better. Or the next night was a little better. And then after that was better. And now I like it. It feels nice.
Okay. So how many weeks have you been doing it now? It's not that long.
No, I think I started right around the beginning of May. So 10 days maybe.
Okay. So you're generally a person that struggles with anxiety. Do you feel any more chilled out, or is it not long enough to notice a difference yet?
I don't know if it's long enough yet. I still have like good and bad days, but I did notice, I don't remember what day we talked about this, where I was feeling like a general sense of like at ease a little bit. So yeah, I don't know if it's that or not. It's still kind of early to tell. I guess we'll see.
Yeah. It's interesting because sometimes you just feel good and then a few days go by and you're like, oh, I just don't feel bad. I just feel good.
Yeah.
There's a researcher I love. Her name's Dr. Joan Iflin. She wrote the textbook called Processed Food Addiction. So she's the primary researcher, clinician, pushing forward the idea of like problematic use disorder of processed foods and treating them not as obesity medicine patients, but as like addicts that need rehab, essentially treating it from a rehabilitative perspective. Super interesting lady. Love her. I've read the book. It's great. I saw her on a podcast one time and she was saying every one of the patients that she deals with, she's like, they all have anxious panic breathing patterns. They're all mouth breathers. And she's like, one of the first things I get people to do is I retrain them how to breathe properly. And I was like, oh, whoa. Like it seemed like such a left field thing for someone that was dealing with more like addiction based treatments and rehab type things. But yeah, she had linked those two things together. And then people struggling with anxiety and parasympathetic or sympathetic nervous system activation, and then seeking things that make themselves feel better, like food, right? So people will drink to calm down or have a cigarette to wind down or, reach for the snacks to wind down or whatever. So she had kind of linked that hyper vigilant state to some of the problematic use disorder behaviors that they had. I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
Crazy. So I think the first step is just pay more attention to your breathing, right? Notice that if you're walking down the street or whatever and your mouth is slightly open and you'll be like, oh shit, like I think I'm breathing through my mouth right now. You know, try to just start by just pushing your tongue on the roof of your mouth and breathe through your nose as much of the day as you can. And if it feels weird, then you're probably a mouth breather, and chances are at nighttime you're doing it as well. And then you can start to take the steps towards making that improvement.
Can we talk about it from a vanity perspective?
Yeah.
So if you want to age well, there's some hallmarks of aging. So like the fat pads of the face start to migrate down. The skin of the eyes starts to droop down. You start to develop nasal labial folds around your mouth, and then eventually they fold into like jowls. All that stuff happens and gets worse if you're a chronic mouth breather. Open your mouth and look in the mirror. So all of that aging and moving down of your fat pads and collagen and everything happens faster versus close your mouth and it changes the shape of your face. There's a whole thing now, it's popular with like young boys, but it should be popular with everybody, called mewing. So there was a dentist or orthodontist named John Mew, and now it's his son that's carrying this on, that came up with the idea of basically exercising your jaw muscles by chewing, but it strengthens the muscles of the jaw. So it squares out the jawline, makes you look a more handsome gentleman, but it also stimulates bone growth in the face as it should properly develop. Loss of bone mass in the face is also one of the hallmark signs of aging when people start to get that like sunken old people. So you got to exercise the muscles of your face to stimulate proper muscle mass and bone growth. It's no different than the rest of your body.
Do you remember when they would, I think it would float around the internet. I don't know who it was, but they would have the like facial exercise people, and you would smile really big and then frown really big and then smile really big. And it was like the most ridiculous looking demonstration that has ever come to be. And it looked absolutely silly. So I'm sure it's just like a much less ridiculous version of that type of stuff. Right. But yeah, you can do stuff to help with the like structural integrity of your face. And it starts from the tongue
and kids too. It's super important developmentally. There's Nordic cultures that it's like part of raising an infant properly is to, if you catch your infant sleeping with their mouth open, you like touch their chin and close their mouth or hold it or tuck the blankets in a way that teaches them to sleep, like right from birth. Basically, they train them to sleep with their mouth closed. Changes the way the teeth come in all straight and whether the dental arch is wide enough for them to have good nasal breathing patterns without it being too narrow in there. And then I think we've talked about this before, the book Jaws, that's all about how basically food is too soft. And that's why we have this epidemic of crooked teeth. That's not a genetic thing. That's a 100% environmental thing. Right. That kids and babies just don't chew enough. They don't gnaw on meat and, tougher vegetables and chewy things. Everything's like pureed and soft and blended and through a straw. And then they end up with weak jaws, weak looking, weak jaws.
And it's interesting that is a desirable trait, right? To have the strong jaw, especially for men. That is like a aesthetically
it's a good looking thing.
Yeah. And it's because it's a sign of health. It's a sign of good integrity in your face.
Form follows function.
Yeah.
The, increasing nitric oxide helps deliver more oxygen around the body, like you said, which delivers more oxygen to the brain. So literally it can improve brain function, cognitive function. There's a reason to call someone a mouth breather is to call them stupid, right? Look at the fucking mouth breather over there. You're like that. We recognize that that's an insult. That means someone's dumb. Yeah. It's because the more you're a mouth breather, the less your brain is getting enough oxygen. That's why that's a thing.
There you go. Breathe through your nose, everybody.
Breathe through your nose as much as you can. There's Brian McKenzie, he was the CrossFit endurance guy for years, is all about training, running with your mouth taped shut.
It's so hard.
It's so hard. I just don't think I have the structural ability to do it. Yeah. I've tried, and we've done it in some of the sweat classes, like max cals in 10 minutes on the bike, breathing only through your nose. And it's so hard to do, but it does give you a little bit more CO2 tolerance. It teaches you to stay calm and keep big, long and slow breaths going in and out. Some people are much better at it than others, but it's a challenge. Next time you do a workout, just try to breathe through your nose for as long as you can before you feel like you have to open your mouth.
And then shortly after that, agree that it's probably easier just to tape your mouth at night and breathe while you're sleeping instead of while you're working out.
Yeah,
it's so hard.
Even, if you have something with rest periods, like Try to train yourself because it helps recovery. Like you said, vasodilation, it brings your blood pressure down, can lower heart rate, all that good stuff. Take a few deep nasal breaths and try to recover as quick as you can. Or right after the workout, do a minute or two of slow breathing, or get yourself back to being able to breathe through your nose, like with a purposeful cool down. All that stuff helps. A little bit of that.
The other thing I forgot to mention earlier is by breathing through your nose, you've got like your little nose hair filters and stuff, and it filters out germs and bacteria and stuff like that better. So you're less likely to get sick if you breathe through your nose.
Allergies too.
Allergies, yeah.
Pollen floating around, yeah.
Yeah.
That's another thing with like asthma being reduced by breathing through your nose. Just less irritants get into your lungs. And then also, like you said, because breathing through your mouth is very dry. Your nose warms and moistens the air. So then your lungs, all those little alveoli in your lungs don't get all dried out and irritated like they do with bronchitis and asthma and stuff. So
it's wild.
So many benefits.
So many benefits.
Okay. So here's a weird one. We were talking about vitamin D and the sun, and I was talking about some interesting little rabbit holes you can go down about how vitamin D may not actually be the thing in and of itself. It just may be a marker for sun exposure. So I have to pull this up. So melanin, when you get a tan, the pigment that your skin makes is melanin. So this is a paper from Frontiers in Immunology from September of last year, a hypothesis and theory article. So by no means certain. It's in the section for multiple sclerosis and neuroimmunology. It's called Melanin, a unifying theory of disease as exemplified by Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and Lewy body dementia. So talking about brain health. So melanin, a dark pigment, plays an important role in the immune system. So we always think of it as like protecting us from the sun, like when you get a tan. It scavenges reactive oxygen species, which are the things that damage your cells and eventually age you. It absorbs metals. So if you have any exposure to like heavy metal toxicity, lead, cadmium, arsenic, things in the water, the environment. It does thermal regulation, so regulating body heat, drug uptake, innate immune system functions, redox balance, which is like reduction versus oxidation, and energy transduction. So this is so weird. Many tissue types, brain, heart, arteries, ovaries, and others contain melanin. So melanin is not just in your skin.
Right.
So other parts of you are getting a tan? What?
Your ovaries have a tan?
Almost all cells contain precursors to melanin, and a growing number of diseases in which there is a loss of melanin and or neuromelanin, like in the brain, are thought to have infectious origins, etiologies. So Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Lewy body dementia, and vitiligo, which is what Michael Jackson had, the thing that eats the melanin in your skin. That's an autoimmune condition.
Yeah.
They've been linked to the herpes virus, which is interesting. Melanosomes cause apoptosis with gut dysbiosis and with inflammation. So a variety of different assaults from the environment, internal and external, can cause basically the death of these melanin-producing cells. So this says, we theorize that under normal healthy states, melanin retains some of the energy it absorbs from electromagnetic radiation, which is like from the sun. So it absorbs some of the sun's energy and then is used to fuel cells. And energy from ATP is used to complement that energy supply. And then a loss of melanin reduces the energy supply of cells. So if you don't have enough melanin, you've lost a fuel, or you've lost an energy source, which is common to all of these neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Lewy body dementia. I would also put, they don't have this in there, but mental health conditions too. That's the Chris Palmer brain energy theory. Something is going wrong. The cells don't have enough energy to function properly. And there isn't enough energy to fuel immune system defenses and remove the normal kind of plaques or things that build up, you know, associated with general metabolism, or just suppressing bacteria or heavy metals or shit that gets in you for whatever reason.
Right.
They're saying this is their attempt to explain why removing those plaques, like all drugs that have been designed to get rid of the beta amyloid plaques, don't do anything to improve Alzheimer's. You can reduce the plaques, but it doesn't improve symptoms at all. And they're saying that maybe because that's a symptom, not a cause, you're not addressing the root cause, which is a problem with lack of melanin and a problem with this available cellular energy. That energy retained in melanin fuels cells in an inverse relationship with ATP, supported by a bunch of studies and all this kind of stuff. So alterations of melanin levels may be at the core of many diseases. So how wild is that?
Well, first of all, like dumb it down for us a little bit here.
Okay, so melanin is the production of melanin is stimulated by the sun, by UV radiation from the sun. You produce more to protect you from UV damage so that you don't end up with damaged DNA and stuff. But they're saying not only that, but that melanin is able to store energy.
So it's like a little solar panel in your body.
Really, that it's like a little solar energy panel. And that if that's true, that we basically, humans need to spend time outside. Humans need to spend time in the sun. Like literally to get enough energy to fuel. This is talking about our brain cells, neuromelanin. But why wouldn't it be? They said, you know, there's melanin in brain, heart, arteries, ovaries, all kinds of types of tissues outside of your skin.
Interesting.
And sometimes people don't understand the different wavelengths of light, UVA, UVB, red wavelength light. Take a flashlight and shine it through your hand. Like photons of light go through your body. Right? That there's no reason that it wouldn't penetrate deeper. And so then vitamin D is also synthesized in the skin as a result of UVB radiation. It's a reaction with cholesterol to create vitamin D. So we know that vitamin D seems to really track strongly. Low vitamin D tracks with like almost every type of disease. But also the research shows that supplementing vitamin D isn't super effective. It doesn't really do a lot. You can improve vitamin D levels, but it doesn't actually reduce a lot of diseases very effectively. So like maybe it wasn't the vitamin D itself. Maybe that vitamin D is a marker for sun exposure. Sun exposure, yes, makes vitamin D, but it also stimulates the production of melanin, which protects your cells in a variety of ways and also provides energy to them.
Right.
How weird with that? I think that whole idea of basically humans are solar powered.
Yeah. Or
isn't that crazy?
We're like a hybrid.
Yeah, like
because
hybrid.
We need our fuel.
Yeah.
But then we can also run some systems on our sun exposure.
Yeah. So you get like a good amount of your fuel from the food that you eat, but that we're basically just, you know, active plants with anxiety. Like we need to be in the sun.
Active plants with anxiety.
We're mobile plants. We're carnivorous plants with anxiety. We just put us outside in the sun, water us, feed us.
It's a t-shirt.
Yeah. But I think that's super interesting. And so there's a variety of things that are fucked in the modern world. Right. You could point to many or all of them as being causal factors for why everybody's so sick right now. But certainly I think one of them could very well be.
Yeah.
We don't go outside nearly as often as we should.
Too many basement dwellers.
Lots of basement dwellers, but just people don't walk places. We car everywhere. When people do go outside, they're super covered up and slap sunscreen all over everything, which blocks all of that production. People are wearing sunglasses all the time. So then I think last time, one of the things I was talking about was how sunlight interacting with the photoreceptors in your eyes stimulates the production of melanin all over the place. So you have to actually like be outside in natural light and not be in perpetual dusk with your sunglasses on all the time. So yeah, I just think so many more reasons to just go outside.
Yeah.
Go outside. And I was saying last time, zone 1 and 2 cardio doesn't have to be a piece of your training. That's just supposed to be you outside living life as a human, walking, biking, paddling. In the wintertime, you're snowshoeing and cross-country skiing and snowboarding and skiing and all these great things. Like living life outside, get your little solar batteries all charged up.
Yeah.
And then doesn't everybody say the more time they spend outside in nature, like how good that is for mental health?
Oh,
There's
for sure.
plenty of research that supports that. And you're like, for a variety of reasons, but also that it's providing more energy to brain cells.
Yeah.
Neat. Okay. So continuing questions from the community.
Yes.
Someone said, should I buy weightlifting shoes?
Yeah.
And our Nike Romellos like over the top, like some of them are quite expensive. So they were kind of like, do I need these? Is this a worthwhile investment? Do I need to own weightlifting shoes?
Yeah. And we've done a podcast on CrossFit equipment, but we'll touch again on the shoes because it's a relevant one. Everybody loves new shoes. So basically what I told him was that we generally don't recommend weightlifting shoes, primarily because weightlifting shoes are good for Olympic weightlifting, the clean, the snatch, to a lesser degree, the jerk. But basically it just helps with your squat positioning. Mm-hmm. It's actually a hindrance when you're deadlifting or pulling off the floor because your elevated heel like changes the way you set up. So it's good for squatting, but it's not good for deadlifting. And then a plethora of other things that we do. You know, if you're doing a WOD and we're doing thrusters and running or thrusters and pull-ups, like it's going to help you on the quarter of the thruster. That's it. And then it's going to hinder you on all the other stuff. So
value, bang for your buck.
Bang
how
for your
often
buck.
you can use them.
Yeah. If I'm going to buy some shoes for CrossFit, I'm going to buy a much more like well-rounded, you know, good for everything type of shoe. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to buy Olympic weightlifting shoes specifically for that like 1 or 2 times a week that you're just squatting and doing nothing else, you could, but then cost benefit, I don't know if it's worth it. Mm-hmm. But then the other thing that I told him was that when developing your squat, I think you're better off developing it kind of bare bones. Mm-hmm. It's like wearing a belt for every squat that you do. Yeah. It helps you at upper limits, but it hinders you with your general training because you're wearing a girdle and is taking away the core stability you need to get stronger in your squats. So we do a lot of our squatting barefoot.
Yeah, come hang out with me on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Shoes are for dorks on Tuesdays.
Because it really does help you like feel the ground and feel where your weight is being distributed in the feet and help you pay attention more to what's going on. And if you're wearing a shoe, which is a little bit of a crutch to escape some of those mobility issues or concerns, you don't often become aware of them, and you certainly never fix them. So I think it's better just to learn to move properly bare bones. And then once you get to the point where you're a very competent lifter, squatter, whatever, and you want to start pushing the limits, then sure, maybe it's worth it down the road. But for most people, I don't think it's worth it.
Yeah. I think if you have tight ankles, it will help you squat lower if your heels are elevated. And it does that by not needing your ankle to flex so far forward, so you can remain putting pressure through your heel, so you keep a balance of quads and hamstrings on both sides of the knee, but without needing quite the ankle mobility. But like you said, that you don't just slap a Band-Aid on it and like, now we're good forever. It's like the goal should be to need less and less and less of the Band-Aids over time, the wrist straps and the belts and the weightlifting shoes and the knee sleeves and all that kind of stuff. It's like we're supposed to be working towards better, cleaner, like more pure positions just on your own, where you are the support for your body. You don't need big cushy running shoes. Your feet are strong enough to support you. You don't need a belt. Your core is strong enough to support you.
Yeah.
You don't need weightlifting shoes. Your ankles bend the way they're supposed to, So.
Yeah. So I don't think the shoes are necessary, especially for a beginner. If you're just a shoe collector and you really want some, I mean, sure, go for it. I saw that Nike had a shoe that had a removable insert that you could put into your shoe. So if you're just lifting or whatever, you could wear them. And then when you're going to wear them the rest of the time, you just take it out. And I think that's a much better investment if you're going to buy something.
If I was going to recommend a pair of weightlifting shoes, I don't own a pair, but Tier partnered up with Aaron Horschig, the Squat University guy, to make a wide toe box lifter. If I was ever going to buy lifters again, it would be those ones, because at a minimum, your feet need to be able to splay properly to try to interact with something. Other lifters, the Nikes and stuff, and the Adidas ones especially, are like super narrow and it smushes all your foot bones. It's like, how are you supposed to create stability and power from there? I don't know. Yeah.
They're also fairly heavy, especially the ones that have the wooden heel. They're quite heavy on your feet. And I remember K-Star doing that whole thing about like wearing heavy shoes is actually super difficult for your back. It makes it puts a lot of pressure into your spine when you just move around in them. And that he was recommending, especially for kids, make sure they have the lightest shoes you can find because it's so much better for their back. So yeah, even if you're doing an hour-long lifting session wearing these things, and it's not as good as having a lighter shoe.
Yeah.
But yeah.
General CrossFit shoes, we've talked about this before, and I've done it as a question of the day sometimes in the gym, like, what's your fave? So there's Nike Metcons, a Reebok Nanos, and they have like various generations of them. The Nobles, I suppose. Now GoRuck's in the biz with the GoRuck Ballistic Trainers, the official shoe of CrossFit.
Yeah.
What else is out there as a CrossFit shoes?
Like the Tier makes the shoe.
Now. Rad. I hear people on the forums, on the interwebs, talking about Rads all the time.
What's that Zero shoe? Did you mention that already?
Yeah, those aren't like CrossFit. I guess they do have one that's meant for like cross training.
Okay.
And it's a little bit more reinforced for rope climbs. The Zeros, XERO. I like those quite a bit.
Yeah.
Lots of people in the gym have those.
But anyways, I was a big fan of Noble, mostly because I just thought they looked cool. But then recently we got a pair of the, what are they called?
GoRucks.
GoRuck what?
Ballistic Trainer.
Ballistic Trainer. And I actually like them better than the Nobles. The Nobles are fairly flat, and then the GoRucks had a little bit more of a drop in them. I think it was like 5 millimeters or something, 5 or 7 millimeters. And at first I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be a fan of that. But then I put them on and actually really liked them. So they are a nice shoe. They feel good for running. They feel better for running than the Nobles do.
Yeah, the Nobles are pretty flat, floppy.
But they're still stable enough that like I can lift in them okay. I generally try to squat without shoes on, but if I'm doing other stuff or a WOD, then so far they've been pretty good.
I know, it was funny when you first put them on, you're like, I don't want to admit it, but I actually really like these shoes. I was like, why don't you want to admit it? You're like, well, I just don't want to look like a bandwagon guy. Like, Nobles out, GoRucks in. Oh, now these are my favorite shoes. You're like, I do actually really like them.
I don't want to be the bandwagon guy. Where it's like, what's next? Okay, we're going with this one now. But I did actually really like the GoRuck shoes.
Yeah, they're sweet.
All right, another question from the community. So it's Meals Only May. One of the rules of Meals Only May is you have to eat at least 30 grams of protein in every meal. So the question came up, why don't we count plant proteins as part of that?
Yeah, so I just said, we're just trying to get rid of nonsense snacking, right? Just eat proper meals. None of this grazing bullshit stuff. How are we going to define what's a meal? It has to contain 30 grams of protein from an animal source. And I made the little handouts, and we've been playing with it with the magnets on the whiteboard and stuff. People are like, why don't we count the plant proteins? Why don't I count my like peanut butter or my almonds or whatever? And for several reasons. There's 3 big reasons. We don't actually, to get nerdy, we don't actually just want protein. We want amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. They're like the Lego blocks, and then the proteins are what you build out of them. There are infinity combinations of ways you can combine amino acids to make proteins, different kinds of proteins. So we're not actually just looking for any protein. We're looking for specific amino acids and in the right amounts and ratios. There's 20 amino acids that you build proteins out of. 9 of them are essential, and a few more of them are conditionally essential depending on certain things like injuries and that kind of stuff. So we need these 9 essential amino acids. We need amino acids in the right ratios. We actually have no ability to store amino acids. There's nowhere, it's not like your fat tissue where you can store lipids. You can build proteins like muscles, and you can have muscle tissue, but you don't just store a pool of amino acids. And if your body is trying to build something and one of the necessary components is missing, the whole production line grinds to a halt.
Right.
So they call it Liebig's law. If you imagine a barrel with planks, the barrel will only hold water up to the level of the shortest plank. And that's it. That's the rate limiter. And so all those other amino acids that are kicking around but can't be used to build anything have to get excreted. You deaminate them, you take the nitrogen off, and you have to basically excrete them or turn them into something else, which eventually, if you had too much of that going on, is hard on your kidneys. So you can end up with the problem of too much protein, but actually from not enough protein, which is weirdly paradoxical to think of. So plant proteins are deficient in many of the necessary amino acids, but 3 in particular: leucine, lysine, and methionine. The big ones that are needed to build DNA, and your cells are replicating all the time. Leucine is really important for building muscle mass, etc. So those 3 are like big time rate limiters. So if we're meeting our protein targets, but from too many plant proteins, we're not actually really meeting our amino acid target. So while you may have some additional amino acids topping up, you have to get the majority of your protein from animal-based sources. Those come in the right amounts and ratios and everything that you need.
Right. And then a lot of the refined, processed, garbage type foods don't have any animal protein, right? So often the protein bars and stuff are like pea protein or whatever.
Protein, soy isolate, or whey protein.
I guess whey protein,
is pretty easy to isolate from dairy.
And whey's okay.
Yeah.
Right? That has all the...
But whey protein shouldn't supply all of your protein. It can top up the last 10%, but it shouldn't be the primary way that you get your protein. Okay, so there's amino acid availability, proper amounts in the right ratios. Plant foods aren't it. There's the bioavailability, which is just because something is in a food doesn't mean you can digest it and get it into you.
Right.
Those are 2 totally different things. So the way they figure out what's in something is they like blend it up and put it in a mass spectrometry machine, and they see what comes out. What were all these atoms, basically? That's pretty irrelevant to how human digestion and assimilation work. So just because a plant food has protein in it doesn't mean that you had the ability to break it down into its amino acid components and absorb it through your gut lining into you and make use of it. So the analogy I was using was like, you're trying to build something. You're trying to build a shed, and you need 2x4s to start building your shed. You're like, I need wood. I need wood to build my shed. And what gets delivered is plywood. You're like, this is technically wood, but this is the wrong wood. And the whole thing grinds to a halt until you get your 2x4s.
Right.
That's the wrong amino acids. The bioavailability is, they delivered the 2x4s, but they're in a box and it's locked and you don't have the key. And you're like, well, okay, yeah, technically they're in there, but I can't get at them. So this doesn't help me at all. I'm still not building my shed. And then the third issue with trying to use plant sources to meet protein targets is that if we're doing it from whole foods, which is like the basis of everything, it's just, it comes with so much extra junk.
Yeah.
Like for you to try to get 30 grams of protein from quinoa, it's 840 calories.
Right.
Or like to try to get 30 grams of protein from almonds, it's 780 calories versus 30 grams of protein from chicken is 140 calories.
Right.
So
there's just a ton of like extra carbs or fats.
Yeah, extra carbs or
in
fats that come. It's just so diluted in protein that it just it becomes impossible. It becomes ridiculous to try to meet protein targets from plant source foods. So it would be like, your 2x4s got delivered, but they came with so much excessive styrofoam and plastic packaging that now your yard is overflowing with garbage. Right. You're like, I can't build in here. There's too much extra shit. So I think for those 3 reasons, that's why we don't use plant foods to get protein or to hit any kind of protein targets. Will you get some ancillary bits of protein from your nuts and your peanut butter and your maybe a little bit of quinoa you ate in your salad or whatever? Sure. We just don't count those ones.
Right.
Those are, if they get in you and you got a few bonus reps, bonus grams, fine.
Yeah.
And then that also saves us from some of the crimes against nutrition in food marketing and processed food, which is things like the Kodiak cakes, waffle and pancake mix,
right,
which has vital wheat gluten added to it. Gluten is the protein in wheat. Not all protein is good protein. Mm-hmm. Some people have celiac disease where they cannot eat gluten. Some people have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, not celiac, but they still don't do well with it. Some people can be okay. No human on earth functions better with super duper concentrated gluten added to their food.
Right.
But the food marketers can put on the label high protein because technically gluten's a protein.
Yeah.
But if you know that and you know that's not the source of protein that you're targeting, then you're getting it from whole foods.
Yeah.
Get your meat, your eggs, fish.
Another one of those like tricky things they'll do is they'll have a plant group that's saying, oh, there's more protein than you think. They'll show like the dry weight of like chickpeas or beans or whatever and show how high protein it is. But like the amount of beans that they're actually talking about is this massive bowl full once it's cooked, and it's not even close to the same amount of chicken or beef or whatever.
Yeah, be on the lookout for that kind of bullshittery out there. You see it on Instagram and stuff all the time from like the vegan influencers.
Yeah, it'll be like 13 grams or 100 grams of beans versus 100 grams of steak, and they'll be comparable or whatever. But 100 grams of dry weight beans versus however they measure the steak. Well,
it's usually raw, right? Raw. So it has more water weight in it because when you cook something, some of the water weight comes out.
Right.
Yeah. So they don't compare like cooked weight to cooked weight. Mm-hmm. So if you did cooked weight of lentils or like serving size to serving size, so they'll do these really deceptive comparisons where it's per 100 gram dry weight of beans or lentils or whatever. And then you're like, do you have any idea how much 100 grams of dry weight of beans or lentils is when it's cooked?
Yeah.
It's an unbearable amount of beans.
It's a massive amount of food to eat, and not good food, like where you would want to eat that much of it, you know? But then it also, like you said, it comes with 80 grams of carbs or whatever. Yeah. So it's just like an obscene amount of food to eat to try to get a little bit of protein.
And just a giant gut bomb of like phytates and lectins and these plant defense chemicals that don't sit well in the human body at high doses for sure. They bind your minerals. So whatever other nutrition you are getting, you're actually absorbing less of it because so even if you did eat eggs or meat or liver, but you accompanied with beans or lentils or corn, you absorbed less of the nutrients that you ate. It's like a negative. They call them anti-nutrients. Yeah. Not only not nutritious on their own, but anti. They're like stealing nutrients on their way out as they get excreted.
I remember 15 years ago when we used to just do one-on-one training, and this was way before we had as much like experience and knowledge as we do now. And this guy I was training, he needed to lose some weight, and he decided he was going to go veggie or whatever. And he was trying to explain to me how much protein there is in romaine lettuce. Did you know how high protein romaine lettuce is? There's a ton of protein in there. And I was like, what? That doesn't sound accurate. And thinking sort of nothing of it at the time. And then looking to see the amount of protein for like gram of lettuce or whatever. And I was like, this guy is going to have to eat like 30 heads of lettuce to get enough protein for one of his meals. Like, there is not enough protein in romaine lettuce.
Crunchy water. There's nothing
water
in there. Yeah. Okay, so if we want to tie this all together, you need certain amino acids to build other things. Your nitric oxide that you were talking about is made from an amino acid called arginine. Best source is animal foods. Melanin that we were just talking about is made from an amino acid called tyrosine, also best source is animal foods, right? And you can keep going through that list if we want to talk about mental health. Well, serotonin is downstream or is upstream of melatonin is made from tryptophan. Best source is animal foods, right? Like you can keep going through these things of all of the very many processes in your body that you need these certain amino acids, or you can't make that thing without it.
And I think supplementing those things from like non-natural sources just doesn't cut it. It's just not nearly as effective as getting it from a real actual food source. So there's certainly something about not just those individual ingredients, but the actual symphony of the food working together as a whole is better than all of its parts.
The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And when we talk about functional movements, we talk about how they're compound yet irreducible. We can talk about functional foods are compound yet irreducible. You cannot create human health by supplementing this amino acid in that one and this vitamin in that one. Like, that's not the same thing, which is why, back to your point before about whey protein is fine. There's nothing like wrong with it. It's, if you've ever made cheese, or I always talk about Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet eating her curds and whey. Cheese curds are the lumpy things, and the whey was the watery part that was left over from making cheese. And people figured out like, oh, hey, there's actually a lot of good nutrition left in this stuff. And it's like a watery substance, and you just dry it. And the dried powder that's left is whey, and it's very high in protein. It's very high in leucine, which is great for muscle building, which is why it's a big thing with bodybuilders. So a good, clean, inexpensive source of good quality protein, and particularly leucine. But it doesn't have all of the other stuff that would have been in like the dairy or raw milk or the whole food source, right? All of the other vitamins, minerals, calcium, like phytochem, all the good stuff that would have been in there too. So it's not like I would say don't, eat a protein powder, but don't rely on that 100% to get all of your protein needs met. I think I've been kind of mulling this over. In nutrition in general, people are trying to give the public, the average person, an easy filter for how to make the right decisions, a heuristic of how do you decide, should I eat this, yes or no? And we don't want to make things super complicated. So we're always trying to make things a little bit more simple. But like any test or any filter, you want to filter out the bad things and you want to keep the good things. No filter is going to be like 100%. So some of them are better than others. Don't eat anything with animal products in it, like vegan. You're like, okay, well, we're going to get rid of fried chicken. So that's probably positive. But we're going to keep like Oreos and like basically all processed foods are vegan plant foods.
Because there's no food in there
Maybe
whatsoever.
you get rid of like the hot dog that also came with a bun and sugary ketchup. So that's not a very good filter. We're going to filter out a lot of really healthy foods, and we're going to be left still with a lot of really garbage foods. So that's not a good filter. If we go, hey, every meal, focus on get enough protein, hit a protein target for the day. If we made it that simple, then people are like, oh, protein cookies, protein pancakes, protein shakes, protein whatever. And it's all this like fake food products thing, trying to achieve as like a fake form of health through fake foods.
Right.
Not quite. That wasn't quite the thing. So what if we said, okay, filter number one needs to be real food, real whole food, single ingredient items. We're like, okay, now we're doing like pretty good. And then if we go, okay, well, now as we build our meals, we want to center them around animal-based foods, but we already said whole foods. So now we're getting the protein. So that's cool. But we're also getting all the vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals and all the great stuff. Nutrients tend to follow protein. So that's why if you use the two basic filters of eat real whole foods, focus on animal-based nutrition at each meal, you're doing pretty good to get yourself to like good quality, not just protein, but also nutrients, a nutritious diet as well.
Right. Yeah. So for dinner, I'm having steak and whatever is a good start.
Yeah.
And then for breakfast, I'm having a ridiculous amount of eggs. And it's hilarious how much of a like shock it's been for everybody in the gym with the 30 grams of protein. Because a lot of people are like, yeah, I had protein. I had an egg. And that's 7 grams of protein. Like, you're not even close.
Yeah. So
we recently wrote down a day of food on the board for someone my size, about 185 pounds. And the breakfast was, what was it, 4 eggs, 5 eggs? No, 4 eggs.
I think it was 3 eggs, half a cup of cheese, and 4 breakfast sausages.
Right. And everybody's like, that is a ridiculous amount of food. Nobody can eat that. I was like, that's like a normal breakfast for me. What are you talking about?
Yeah. People are like, that's an intimidating breakfast. What are you guys eating? What is happening out there? So
like I'll usually have 4 eggs and 3 to 5 sausages or bacon, depending on how hungry I am, and then a little bit of cheese in there. And it's 60-ish grams of protein in my breakfast. Yeah. I don't know. It's good. It works for me.
This is what CrossFit is, the methodology. We bring precision and accuracy to what we're doing. This is what CrossFit revolutionized with fitness. It was like, hey, you should keep track of what you're doing. And you should be making improvements in your ability to generate power across a broad variety of tasks.
Yeah.
And if you're not very fit. And if you're not improving over time, your program sucks.
Right.
So that's just measurable outcomes. But the same thing applies to nutrition. You should be bringing precision and accuracy and paying attention sometimes, at least, until you develop the basic habits of how to do it. I think we learned in the water thing, people are like, yeah, I think I drink enough water, until you track it and you're like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Or I think I eat a pretty good amount of protein, because people think, well, I eat animal foods. I eat eggs, I eat meat, I eat fish and stuff. Like, but have you tracked it? Oh, people are like, how do you get this much protein? They're like getting half of what what the target is, which we say for people in the gym that want to not just be barely not sick with a deficiency disease. We want to be optimal humans. We aim for a gram per pound of ideal body weight.
Yeah.
And especially as you get older, that number becomes even more important to
Yeah.
maintain muscle and bone mass past the middle half of your life. Yeah. You got to like check.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to track. You got to write it down. You got to measure things out. You got to put things on the kitchen scale and use your measuring cups and stuff and just see if you're getting enough.
And that's just it. It's like a check-in once in a while, because I don't think we're the type of people that recommend like going to a restaurant and weighing and measuring everything and being like super exact about calories and whatever. I think it's mostly just like making sure you're getting as much nutrition in as you think you are. And to do that, you have to measure. But I don't measure my breakfast every day, because I know if I have that, I know I'm going to have 60 grams of protein, like ish, right?
Yeah.
And that's good enough. And I can be like, okay, for the rest of the day, I know I need to get about this much more. And I know based on previous experience how much that's going to be. And that way I can make sure I'm eating enough. So,
yeah. And then, we've seen enough people over the long-term trajectory of having this gym of like, you can show up consistently and, have good mechanics and good consistency, like the CrossFit charter. But if your diet sucks, you will make little to no progress. You'll be maybe preventing yourself from backsliding into sickness, which is beneficial. But man, you could certainly be accelerating all of your efforts in the gym by, getting enough protein, paying attention, eat real food, get off the junk.
Yeah. I've said it before. The older I get, the more attention I have to pay to my nutrition. That's how it works.
Yeah.
When you're 20, you can get away with a lot more than when you're 40. So it's worth diving in, and there's all kinds of stuff you can start to tweak and play around with.
Yeah. Just basically pay attention. But I think no matter what nutritional paradigm you choose to ascribe to, for it to work, it has to sit on a foundation of eating real food.
Yeah.
There's no version of keto or paleo or carnivore or vegan or vegetarian or anything that works if it sits on using food products instead of food.
Right.
And the whole thing, I've said this over and over and over again, is you just have to read the ingredients on what you buy.
Yeah.
The entire grift of food marketing relies on people being dumb and ignorant and gullible, basically. And you shatter the entire scam by just reading the ingredients.
Yeah.
Somebody had to lobby for that to be a law, that those things are on there, that information is available to you. You literally just have to look at it. And then you will see immediately that all of the magical spells trying to be cast on the front of the package, it just immediately evaporate when you just look at the ingredients and read what something is. And you go, what even is this? Would I eat this? What's xanthan gum?
Yeah.
What's, mono N diglycerides? Why am I eating that? What's polysorbate 80? Why is this in here? What's carrageenan?
Yeah. The worst oversimplification in all of nutrition is that all you need is calories, because you need nutrition, you need nutrients, you need all of these different vitamins and minerals and whatever to make your body function. It has nothing to do with the energy coming in. It's all about what that is carrying.
Yeah.
So it's such an if only calories mattered, then you could eat nothing but chocolate bars and gummy bars in the right quantity and you'd be perfectly healthy until the day you die. But you can't. You just can't get away with that. You need nutrition. You need actual nutrients in your food.
And I will basically spend from now till I die shouting from the rooftops about you have to know what it is. Don't eat it if you don't know what it is. And if you want to eat junk food, that's fine. Just eat junk food and know that it's junk food. The absolute biggest tragedy to me is when people think they're eating a healthy food, but they're still just eating junk food that costs more.
Right.
Dressed up as like a wolf in sheep's clothing, dressed up in fancy, stupid marketing, right? Thinking that a protein bar is a health food when it's actually just another version of a candy bar that costs 3 times as much. That kind of stuff drives me crazy. If you want to eat junk food and eat good stuff, treat yourself, whatever. If you want to eat healthy food, eat actual healthy food. Don't eat garbage food dressed up as health food at 3 times the price.
For sure. It's like when people pay for the like 20 grams of protein Snickers bar. Just eat a Snickers bar for half the price and take a little bit of whey protein, and you've got the exact same thing as your Snickers protein bar.
Snickers Marathon, wasn't that what it was called?
Yeah.
Wow, what a bunch of garbage. Okay, so yes, continue with the protein grams.
Yep.
Mental Health Month. Go back and listen to the 3 we did last year. Lots of interesting stuff in there. Happy to talk about it anytime.
Breathe through your nose.
Breathe through your nose. Calm down. Calm your shit. Close your mouth whenever you can.
Nobody wants to hear from you anyways. Just kidding.
You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You can listen twice as much as you talk. Right?
That's like
Kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to be done talking and go shut our mouths now.
All right.
Okay, bye. See you in the next one.
See you guys.